So thank you. It's so great to come out to the community. And that's the gift that Anita and her team are bringing, you know. Those of you that do know me, I'm mandated to receive people into my office and my work at the Cancer Center. I'm not resourced to come out to meet you in your homes or in your community. So it's wonderful to be here. The content of this presentation has been generated by 6 years and over 650 individuals who've experienced cancer. And some of you are here. Some of you have conversed with me about what that is like. The question that when someone usually comes into my office with, it's very simple, and it's the hardest question in the world. How do I do this? How do I do this in my life? And that's so different for everyone. So what I'm going to share tonight is really what I have learned from incredible human beings who've, like yourselves, maybe been landed with this disease in your lives and had to roll up your sleeves and say, my goodness, how do I live life today now? How do I get through treatment? How do I tell my children? How do I look forward to a future that I may not have? Those are the questions that are inside every day. And so because I don't prescribe chemotherapy or radiation, that's the landscape I walk in. And 6 years ago, I knew I had no answers. And the day I have an answer, I'm not really offering anything of any value. What I do know and what I've learned is inside each of you and each human being, each of us, is a spirit, is a something that has strength and that can tackle those questions and find what answers are meaningful for you for today, because they may not be meaningful tomorrow. And then you have to go back and dig again. And that's what we try to support you to do. And my role is really about discovering what helps. So this presentation is really the distilling of what has helped. The majority. Not everyone, but what have we learned together about what helps us anchor in a day and find these intangibles like hope or peace or strength, or joy. How do we have joy living what you might be living? But I do believe it's possible maybe for moments, and together we can search for that. And it's the together that's important. So today, 3 basic things I'm hoping you get to take away. How do we get fear out of the body? The study that I came to after about 2.5, 3 years of running groups and listening to individuals was, well, we can do what we can for the tumors, but it is the fear and despair that really is also as much of a challenge. So what I'd say to people is, well, I can't do the chemo or the radiation, but I can help you tackle fear and I can help you tackle despair. And fortunately, we have a lot of teachers and spiritual traditions on this planet that have offered to us, it is actually very possible to tackle fear. So that's where I have tried to learn and what I've tried to distill helpful interventions that might work at some point in a day. So the body is part of fear. The body is part of the feeling of hopelessness, of despair. The other piece is the mind. So we're going to work on creating antidotes for those fear stories. I'm sure you've got many. We all do, no matter what our lives are like. Big, small. And then how do you source that sense of being alive today? Just for today. What I have learned is you can't bank it for tomorrow. Wish we could, but we can't. So how do we do that for today? And keep ourselves in today. So that's the 3 things I'm going to offer to you. And again, I want to emphasize these are things I've learned with many individuals together. So, the Dalai Lama, when asked what surprised him most about humanity, he answered man, because he sacrifices his health in order to make money. Then he sacrifices money to recuperate his health. And then he's so anxious about the future, he does not enjoy the present. The result being that he does not live in the present or the future. He lives as if he's never going to die, and then dies, having never really lived. I think there's a twist on that statement when it comes to cancer. You didn't ask for it. It has a tendency to take you way forward and rob you of today, and way past, I wish it was the way it was, and rob you of today. It still functions a bit like a thief of what might be of value today. But that's really where we're living. That's a cultural statement of the society that we're living in. So something to remember is what you're living is very countercultural to the thrust of our society that wants to have better, more, fight, death to the end. That's great. I hope we get there with cancer. But for today, if we can't have that, how do we live today? That's been the question I've focused my entire practice around. Despair at the core is spiritual pain. And a lot of us can be ambivalent about words like spiritual. Spiritual is, we have a spirit that can rise up and meet suffering. We have something in us as human beings that can meet suffering and then make something from it. Do something with it. That's different than perhaps, I don't know, I can't make judgments about lions and tigers, but that's something. And that's what teachers like Viktor Frankl, who is a survivor of Auschwitz, lost his family there, discovered they could not take his freedom. And he came out and he was the father of existential psychotherapy. How do you make meaning and purpose out of your life when life struggles, life suffering, you lose control, you lose power? How do you still make meaning? He dedicated his life to discovering that because he discovered in Auschwitz it's possible. So there's a great teacher for us. Pain of the spirit is when I've lost all sense of being able to find ground under my feet for today, a sense of hope for today, a sense of I'm alive, it's okay, I've got what I need. That's spiritual pain. That's the pain of a human being who's lost a sense of anything and any support. So that's often where sometimes folks are when they come through my door. And what I've learned again is that is something, if we meet with another who can listen and be there with us, we can start to have our own spirits stirred enough to start rising up and figuring out how to do this. We lose our hearts. This is from one of our gynecological surgeons. He said, nothing extrinsic ever flags spiritual pain. You have to attend to the internal, both in yourself and the other. So you might be walking around feeling, it's okay, and you're kind of depressed, and somehow, sometimes at the bedrock, what's happened is your sense of trust in life, your sense of trust in your body and yourself, it's been ruptured, just ruptured. And you can't really put your finger on what the problem is. That's your soul and spirit in pain. That's that essence of who you are that's now in crisis and anguish, going, how do I make meaning out of this? How do I watch my loved one live this? All those questions. And just as a government health warning, just my even naming these kinds of depth feelings or questions, you may find they get stirred. And that's okay. And if you need to just say, whoa, that's enough, feel free to leave. I will not take it personally. But you see, once we even open the possibility of acknowledging our heart's struggle, our hearts kind of feel a bit of relief. Oh, finally someone's talking about me. Finally, that's it, And so the floodgates open. And that's okay. So if you're having feelings, it really is okay, just be with it. And if you need to put a hand on your heart, just gently hold yourself and stay with yourself and take care of your own well-being. But this will stir things maybe, because we're walking now in the sacred ground of your heart and your spirit. Fear will create spiritual pain. Fear's a real thief. And a lot of people have described cancer as a thief. I also say fear is. If you think about what fear does, right? Fear can be so paralyzing you don't even leave your house. Fear is very much a thief of all good things in life. And that was a quote, it was in the London Free Press by one of our patients, and she stated that, and that's on the headline of my poster for soul medicine groups, because I found it so profound. She named this for herself. It was the fear. It was, in her words, killing me. So I've run over 10 different groups. I call them soul medicine. Medicine for the heart, mind, and spirit whilst you're living with cancer. And I've had now over 50 participants across about 3.5 years. And we do a study on fear in the first session. So I have folks look at the question, and you may want to jot it down, take it home. When I'm afraid, I ... You fill in the blank. So you do a little study in fear in your own experience. What do you do when you feel fear? Do we even know what fear feels like in me? Because what I often find is I or anyone we can be walking around and actually we're paralyzed, but we're not attuned to it because it's become such a normal state. You know, it's become sort of how you are in life. So study how it affects you. What are your behaviors? How has it affected your normal behavior in life? What's going on in your body, your mind, and your heart? So we do a study. So these were our findings across all the different groups. It's not pleasant. And I had randomly drawn lots of squiggles and lines on the chart paper, and then I noticed at the end, my goodness, it kind of looks like a CT scan of a tumor. Fear's a bit of a tumor, and it's got its own tentacles, and it needs its own therapy. So that's how I came up with targeted therapy for fear. And you may relate to many of these symptoms of fear. And that came from the dialogues in the groups. So just notice, and then you can use your body or those symptoms to say, whoa, I've got such a tight chest today, or my mind's going everywhere. It's like, whoa, you know, fear got a hold of me today, maybe. I got those worry thoughts going on again. So that was our study. And what I've discovered is we can tackle fear and despair. We can do that. Key is together. Not easy and not really possible alone, but together we can. And it does feel rather like this picture. I put pictures out in the group and invite people to sort of pick one that you relate with. That's one of the hot favorites, because that's often how folks are feeling, you know, excavating, trying to get up a really treacherous slope. So how we find our strength. And here's the trick. Here's where sometimes we do part ways with our tradition of many, many years, because the problem is we can't bottle what we need. We can't bottle hope and peace and joy and strength and stability and zen and keep it. We all have to find what that means for each of us today. And like I said before, it might be tomorrow something different. So there's an attunement that is expected of us in one sense. So how we find strength is very unique. And here's where all those people I've really walked with through a lot of struggle, it forges what I call life's true gold in the crucible, because it's fiery, it's painful, it's difficult. And that true gold is what I would call wisdom. So if there's one thing I would like to offer you, I didn't have this at the beginning of my work in the Cancer Center. I didn't have that word. I didn't have that insight. What I've learned from all of those people who shared their vulnerabilities, their struggles with me, is out of that comes something profound and often very wise. And if I look around me in this society today, I see this quality missing or not as revered, right? We're looking for wisdom from our leaders. We're looking for wisdom for our children, our grandchildren. We're looking for the wise way to live our lives and live on this planet. So what I found from many people's experiences in the struggle of trying to find hope, what peace means for today, how do I keep myself up through this like storm, the how becomes your own personal wisdom. And then people come to you and say, boy, how are you doing that? And you go, well, I don't feel strong on the inside, but I guess I'm doing it. You know, they see something and you find maybe people start coming and drawing to you because it's like, oh, I don't know, how are you doing this? I want that. Well, try a little pain and suffering. But you know, you forge something of great value. And I say often to families and parents particularly, you didn't ask for this, but it's the PhD in life that your children and grandchildren most need. They need to know how to do struggle, suffering, mortality. So we have a chance to come up with our own little tiny response. Yours, mine, each of us. And it's not going to be the grand, we won't all be Gandhis. But you will have something that's of real value, a word, a smile, an intuition, a knowing of what's needed by that human being in front of you because you've walked through the valley and you know what it means to suffer. So what I do believe on some level is that our pain and struggle doesn't have to be for nothing, and that with support, with connection to other wise human beings and supportive human beings, we can forge something of value for ourselves and our families, our children, out of the struggle. So is it possible? I think I've kind of answered that already, but I believe it is. And these are some of the people who I've been inspired by. Arundhati Roy is a beautiful activist in India for women and women's rights. Gave an incredible speech on 9/11's anniversary to North America. If you Google her in 9/11, you can watch her speech. It was the most beautiful, insightful speech I've seen. And then these two at the bottom are people in soul medicine groups, with permission, of course, to have their collages displayed. And in the soul medicine group, we put together a collage of your medicines, things that inspire you, feed you, make you feel good when you look at it in the picture, words. And what you notice when you do something like that on a Bristol board is that there wasn't much about cancer on it. But it's very inspiring. It becomes something that at the end of the group you can hold up and say, that's my essence. And in fact, amazingly, I thought cancer had taken it away, but it hasn't. That's still me. So to get what's inside of you out into picture or form, and collage is a great idea, you don't have to be a good artist, you just rip pictures out and slap them on a Bristol board with a glue stick. It starts to move your spirit. It starts to give you that sense of, oh, I'm still here. So those are their two collages. Jen and Rob, I just published a book with Jen, Jennifer Fazackley, and Grace Bradish. Grace Bradish is a nurse practitioner in CCAC in the End of Life team. I think the name has changed 5,000 times, so I can't quote what it is right now. She's an amazing, amazing, experienced woman in her profession. Jennifer Fazackley is currently a leader in CCAC, but also became a patient in our program as the wife of Rob, who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer at 47 with 4 children. And it was one of those rare experiences. I was privileged to be with them basically from the beginning right to the end and past his death. So I actually had the privilege of sort of walking alongside and in the experience all the way along. Plus they lived out of town, so most of my support was done actually through email and writing. Jen would BlackBerry us on her firewalled CCAC in the loop of the system BlackBerry, and I would respond. And so the journey was tracked in narrative. And the profound thing about that experience for all of us was, at the beginning it was shattering, it was everything you can imagine. But the journey itself, and I know journey is a loaded, ambivalent word, and I agree, it's not the best, but this experience was very much a journey. And through the experience came what I have come to deeply believe is that even if we end up having to face our death and mortality, it still can be a profoundly sacred and healing process. We can still die whole, no matter what happens in our bodies. And so that experience was moving for all of us, and Jennifer wanted to share her story and her experience with others who may be going through it. So the book was published in 2012. It's interesting, it's found its way hand to hand rapidly because it's inspiring despite the sad ending. There's an article at the back that Ian Gillespie published in the London Free Press, and he titled it Inspiring, Sad but Inspiring Tale, because it is very inspiring, which it feels like an oxymoron. that such a sad ending could be inspiring, but that's our offering. It really is our offering. So, the practice, this is now down to the tangibles. The first practice, as I just shared in the soul medicine group, is study your own patterns of fear, because we're all different, right? Some could feel like a deer in a headlight, some could be, I just get very, very busy, or some can be I stay home and I just feel collapsed, and then it can change on a given day. But get to know, when fear creeps up on you, what happens? And it might be a huge wave. And it might just be subtle, that it starts stealing something from you day to day, and before you know it, 2 weeks have gone by and you're puddle on the floor in your home and you don't want to leave. So start studying that fear experience. And then despair, I didn't put it on here, but fear and despair are nuanced, they're different. So do the same with hope and despair. Get to know how it affects you in your mind, your body, and your emotions. So here's a place to anchor yourself. Fear cannot tell you a single truth about the future. Can it? Can I know what tomorrow's going to bring? I can have an imagining what it might bring. Can you know it's really true? And if you go back to the day you or a loved one or a friend or somebody that was connected to you around your cancer experience, go back to that time when it was first diagnosed. Could fear tell you all the incredible things that showed up for you from that day to this? Friends, meals, support, phone call in the right moment. Couldn't do it. So, very important teaching around fear. Fear is a torturer. Fear wants to take you down the rabbit hole. It has no intention of making you feel good. And it will find every weak point in your defenses, and it will make sure you feel very bad. So, important thing to remember is fear is not your friend. And neither can it tell you or will it tell you the truth. Remember, fear will never tell you about the impossible possible. Look at the tree. Look at where it's growing. If that's true for that tree, well, we're animals, right? We're part of the earth. That could be us. We could be growing up out of a really hard place and standing tall. Fear won't tell you about that. In Christianity, there's a word called providence or grace. In other traditions, there's other words that mean the same thing. That something in life kind of sometimes just shows up and helps you. And I actually go back to the fairy tales a lot, particularly with mothers. Because if you think about the fairy tales, how often are they that, mom's died, there's a horrid, nasty stepmother that's trying to kill hero or heroine, and the children are sort of cast off to figure out how to survive. When I'm really big into fairy tales and dreams, and done a lot of work on them in my personal life. When you look at where the fairy tales come from, Grimm's went around Europe and gathered the tales from the storytellers. And very often, the storytellers are giving the stories that have grown up out of a cultural experience. So why are there so many children in the forest, or young children sort of facing the dark forces of life and having to figure out how to survive? Because life was really hard. Lots of people died, babies died, mothers died. They had to pass on some wisdom to the next generation about how you deal with this. So the fairy tales came out of human experience. And what do they teach us? They teach us that Hansel and Gretel get the witch in the oven, figure out how to get home, and yes, there's a happy ending, and there may not always be a happy ending, but they point to what some of these words are trying to also point to. That there might be something in life that gives you a little breadcrumb, that gives you a next something and just enough for today. Remember, fear won't tell you that about tomorrow. Know your worst fear stories, and as hard as they might be to look at in a quiet moment or with a friend, just make sure you're on top of what are your worst fear stories. Because you can't tackle it if you don't know what it is. But we're not going there tonight. That's like 6 sessions. And that's not where you go at the beginning. We have to dose ourselves. But make sure you know what they are. So I have to say, one of the pieces I get from working where I work is I have a lot of work to do around my own relationship with cancer and what could happen to me, what could happen to my children. So I have developed my own strategies, my own mental and emotional and physical ways of grounding myself in the knowledge that this could be me. This could be me. How does that change my parenting? How does that change my life today? How does that change my relationships? And it's been an incredible teaching. So I work as hard as people that walk through my door too. So know what your worst fear stories are and know why. Why is that my worst fear story? Oh, because for me, this is one of mine. I don't believe anyone can look after my kids the way I do. Well, there's truth to that. There's truth. No one ever will be like my mom. However, are there good people in the world? Are the people designated? People I chose? Yes. Agony to not be there. Will life show up for them? Will they get breadcrumbs in the forest? Can it actually make them stronger in some way? Maybe. So you see how I work with that? So some days I have to do some work around that. But you walk your way through to a different place than that worst fear that's like, it's the absolute, so I can't even let that happen, but what if it did? So that's why we need to know our worst stories. But we're going to put that over here now and walk away. So dissolving fear. The biggest practice, those of you that have tried this know it's a challenge, is to create your antidote stories. So fear comes along and says, oh my gosh, that was a twinge. Oh my goodness, right? So you know the twinge experience maybe. You've got some pain, don't know what it is, got to call for an appointment, and meantime your mind is gone haywire. So you want to have challenge stories. This actually comes from an old practice in Buddhism because they studied the mind. That's what Buddhism did. They studied the suffering that the mind creates. So the second part of the practice of creating your antidote to a fear story is you have to repeat it over and over and over and over and over. So any of you trained dogs, I know we have someone here that trains dogs. You have to make them sit how many times? How many times should I make a dog to sit to teach it, right? Think of your mind like that puppy where it's not really a benign like a puppy. Think of it like a nasty, powerful wolf that wants to eat you. You know, you're training it. No, you sit. No, you sit. So it's exhausting at first. However, it works over time. I'm going to share that thoughts are neurological pathways. They really are. So remember when you learned to ride a bike, it was very difficult, then you got good, and then you didn't have to think about it. Driving a car, same thing. Thoughts are the same. Every thought has its own little train tracks in your brain. So if you spend a lot of time in fear, guess what's happening in your brain? Lots of neural pathways. So in fact, you just drive past like the cancer center, and suddenly you're everywhere, in every memory, and every worst thing that's ever happened there. That's because you've got train tracks in your brain that have memory. So when it comes to sourcing hope, sourcing peace, sourcing a sense of ground today, it's hard work to get those neural pathways going. And it's like trying to learn to ride a bike or train a dog to sit. So in a sense, there's a little bit of brain gym here. There's excellent science. Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's the guru and founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction, has done a ton of research on the practice of mindfulness, watching the thoughts, pulling yourself back into the present moment and staying there. So we're going to do a practice, and we're going to do it with a small, relatively insignificant fear. You know, don't like the bugs when I go to Muskoka. Something very, very benign. So keep it very benign, and if you can find someone to do this exercise with, if you feel that you need to be introverted, please feel free and just write. We have to honor all of our different personalities. But pick a moderate, you know, a small, benign fear, concern, and then write down the sentence that comes with that thought, right? So for me, I hate bugs. I come from England. I get welts. So my thought narrative is about camping in Canada. I'm gonna get eaten alive by bugs, and I hate bugs, but I wanna go camping and I hate bugs. So I have to work on that, right? So Helen, what do I need? I need good bug spray. And then the thought, oh, that's dangerous, it's poisonous. It's like, okay, how many days are we going? 4. Is it really gonna be that bad to use it for 4 days? No, okay, so we'll take the bug spray. How can I look after myself with bugs when I'm there? Well, maybe they won't be so bad. Last year they weren't, right? So I can go back to my experience and say, okay, last year they weren't. There's another antidote. Well, if they're really bad, I can go in the tent. Or if they're going to be bad and I'm worried, I could buy one of those lovely kitchen tents, right? So there's my antidotes. So do you get a sense of what we're doing? So write down the thought that comes that's the fear story or the worry. You can call it a worry story. Just write your sentence. And then practice, either with someone you came with or a person, or if you want to just write, just practice writing down 1 or 2 antidote stories. Come up with your antidotes. Would anyone like to share? Yeah, go for it. Okay. So what was your fear statement or your worry?
I'm afraid of the abundance of spiders at the cottage this summer.
I'm afraid of the abundance of spiders at the cottage this summer.
Yes.
I'll repeat it loudly in case people can't hear. So your antidotes are?
Well, we had talked about I'm going to take a couple of friends with me to help me clean the first day.
Awesome.
I can bomb them.
I can bomb them. I can take friends to clean. I can bomb them.
I thought about the bomb not being very healthy, right?
Right.
Pros and cons, all right. And then Linda asked me, right, they may not be as bad as they were the 2 years ago when I was there.
Yep.
And then she asked me, how many times have I been there? I said about 8 years, and she said, and how bad, was this the only time they were bad? And I said, yes. So the other 7 years weren't as bad. It was just that 1 year.
So great.
And yeah, so
Thank
that's
you.
when we started to come to reality.
Thank you. That is such a perfect example. Thank you so much. Although there's no perfection, right? I just completely contradicted myself.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So did everyone catch this? The focus is on the bad spiders and how bad they're going to be. And out of 8 years, in fact, it's only been once that they've been really bad. So there's a great example of how that torturer, right, is going to focus on the one time when there were 7 lovely ones. So great. Thank you for sharing. So here's my theory. If you practice on the small things like spiders and mosquitoes, work with this as an exercise and practice, right? You don't go on a 20-day meditation retreat, 10 hours a day, like one of my friends did, without practicing, or else you're gonna fall apart. So you don't tackle the big monsters. You can't. They're too powerful and big. But practice and get your brain working. It really is brain gym, and I've really worked on this myself a lot in my life over the last numbers of years. What I find now, it's a fairly automatic process. It's like something will come along. And I call it walk around the clock. If you're really going to be hardcore, for those of you that like boot camp, try doing a walk around the clock with a thought. So a fear story, and make yourself, so the fear story is at 12, find an antidote, a reframing story for 1, 2, 3, all the way around back to 12. Make your brain do that, because remember, you're laying down neural pathways. Then when it comes to the biggies, you've got a skill, right? And if you look at commercials on TV, what you will notice is we are not being helped with this project. If you look at our society, start studying fear, right? We are going to try to swim upstream when you try to change fear in your life or the stories. And so when the biggies hit, there's not a lot of support for us, you know? So it is countercultural, and we do need to have support in that. So that's the process of changing your fear stories and your mind. So here's practice number 3. The third is your body, because if you think about fear, it lives in your body, right? It's a body experience. It paralyzes us. So we're going to do a practice. Those of you that have met me will know this. I have now many individuals, I teach this in every presentation I do to staff, so there's lots of staff that practice this now in our program, and they came and they probably do other things themselves anyway, it's not just this. But it's called the calm strategy. And so we're going to try it right now. It can only be experienced. It cannot be mentally grasped. So the first and core piece is get your feet on the ground. Because when you're feeling bombarded by the storms of life and your mind is kind of plaguing you with the worries, it's nothing like having your feet on the ground, because there's ground under your feet all the time. So you feel groundless, you feel like you're adrift, but in fact, you've got ground under you. So get your feet to help you remember that. And then you can close your eyes. If you prefer to keep them open, there's no rights or wrongs here. Look at something neutral or look at a spot on the carpet. One hand on your heart, and this is particularly for overwhelmed moments because it actually does help your heart feel calmer. It may be true that it lowers your heart rate a little. It's comforting. So feet on the ground, and then just let your body breathe for you. This is not meditation techniques, this is just let your body breathe. Because when we're out of control, as we actually usually are, we can't control rain or storms, it's helpful to remember our body knows how to breathe. And then imagine that you're actually breathing through your feet. So you're pulling your breath, you're pulling the oxygen from the trees that are around us that are pouring out for free the oxygen that we're breathing. Our life support system, as my elder friends Mary Lou and Dan Smoke say, they teach, our life support system, breathe through your feet up into your heart, and then when you exhale, imagine that you're static, that worry static, that fear, that whatever's possessed you right now in the moment, it's gripped you. Exhale and send it through your feet back to the earth. And if it helps, some people find this helpful, so imagine you've got strong roots and they're growing right down through the concrete because they're so strong, right to the core of the earth. And when you breathe in, you're breathing the strength right into your heart, right into your mind and your body. And you're exhaling what you don't need, which is the fear or the despair. You can let it go back to the earth. It can be recycled into something strengthening. And if it helps, plant yourself somewhere that's in nature that you love. Let a place call you. And if one comes to mind, imagine you're there with your feet on the ground and that you're breathing in that beautiful, beautiful medicine of nature from around you. And let the healing wisdom of nature fill you. And exhale what you can't control, what you can't do anything about today. Exhale the fear stories, they're not true anyway. And feel your body in the here and now. And feel the medicine of that place in nature around you. And at a certain point, if you can drop into your belly and drop into your breath, you'll notice your body really does know how to breathe. That's the one thing we do without even thinking. It's a moment you can give yourself to let go and be supported and comforted with your hand on your heart, ground on the feet, supported by the earth. Think of your friends and family, all that connection, heart to heart. Very real, very strong, unbreakable. Notice how your body feels in this moment compared to 2 minutes ago. Now, if it's a particularly difficult day, it may not help, And then you go find a really good friend and you just do whatever helps. But again, think of the neural pathways in your brain and the train tracks. If you can teach your body to remember this calm state, and the prescription I've given, and I've done this with lots of groups over the last 15 years and individuals, if you can do this like 3, 4, 5 times a day, just for 30 seconds, 1 minute, going to sleep, pull your feet up on the bed and feel that bed under your feet, and do this as you're going to sleep. Some people have said it really has helped them have better sleep. But the more you coach your body to remember the calm state, the easier it gets to have it when you need it. So again, it's a bit like brain gym, but it's body gym without the weights. So if you can do this a few times a day, after 2 weeks, this is our study in the different groups I've done, it's taken about 2 weeks, 3-4 times a day of your calm moment, you'll notice somehow life is feeling maybe just a little bit different. You've got something in here. There's a bit of flow in the day. And it just helps you, and it helps you when you're going through difficult procedures or treatments. It's a way you can get your body sort of calmer to go through something that's not going to be particularly pleasant. So I offer that to you. I had a vision when I started the cancer program. If we could reduce the static stress in the air with people trying to remain a bit calm, all of us, by 1%, maybe we'd all feel calmer. Because I actually do agree with a lot of the spiritual teachers that this insane pace of life and this overwhelmed feeling and this sense of anguish and anxiety, this sense of I've lost connection, it's an interior thing, it's an inside job, and it's for each of us to get back to our home in here. So that exercise is one of the rapider ways, faster ways I've discovered. Feet on the ground is the reason, because you're not in your head. If you're focusing on your feet, your brain can't worry. Have you noticed that? It'll jump off and start worrying, but you go, no, wait a minute, we're back on my feet, thank you. We're breathing through the feet. So it can't worry about anything when it's focusing on your feet. That's why we use the feet, and it gets you out of your head into where you need to be, which is here in your center. The last practice is soul medicine for your heart and your soul. Marion Woodman, who was a world-renowned Jungian analyst, given honorary doctorates from many universities, made this statement: never before has our society lost touch with the wisdom of the instincts as much as ours. We've lost connection here. Where do you get hope, peace, joy? Where do you get a sense of how do I live today? What decision should I make? It's an inside job again. It's in here. So how do you get back there? How do you connect with that, especially when you got a lot going on? You feed your soul. So what I try to offer people is once a day at least, give yourself a soul medicine. You're taking lots of other medicines. Let's feed your soul and heart. And what is a soul medicine? It's anything that makes you feel comfort, hope, laughter, connection, and strength. Any of those good feeling things. So you might want to, at the end of the day, for a little while, note down what has given you a sense of any of those feelings. Those are your medicines. Make sure you get them in a week. If you get to a few days without anything, call someone. Call someone. So I'm going to talk about Judy's Peace Project, which is the next slide. Judy beautifully gave me permission, and this just happened yesterday. So this is a real live conversation. And she gave me permission because, you know, Judy's struggling with meaning and hope in the day, and her thought, waking up, is, and please forgive the language, but she said, sometimes I wake up and I think, another damn day. Where's my peace? And I loved the authenticity of that. I loved the honesty, and I could say I've heard a lot of people that could relate to that. Another day. How am I going to get through it? So we started a little project together looking for peace. I said, okay, peace is my business. That's spiritual care. We can do peace. So I said, let's look at together between the next session, what gives you peace? What does give you peace? What in a day gives you a sense of peace? And let's take some notes and we'll swap notes. So one of the findings was her cat on her lap, Oakley. So she came back, had this lovely, beautiful list. My cat sitting with me. That's a medicine. And in fact, the list was much longer than she'd expected. And she said, it's funny, didn't think I had any. But just focusing, just attuning to that, I discovered I do. There's moments. I said, great, let's look for more for next time. I got my kids on it. So I'm actually inviting you to participate in what I'm going to call the Peace Project. And I would like to share as kind of medicine one person to the next in the Cancer Center. We're in the middle of creating a bit of a meditation book or something for people to look at whilst they're waiting for appointments with beautiful pictures. And I've really been struggling with what words can I put on, right? Because it gets a bit loaded, because what works for you might be really annoying to the next person. So Judy was a huge gift, because I said, I've got it. Let's put in there what people discover about moments of peace. Because I can't really argue with a cat sitting on the lap. I can't get annoyed at that, right? I might not be able to relate, but it gets a bit loaded if you try to use spiritual teachings from different traditions, right? It's difficult. So I'm starting a peace project. This is live invitation. If you have an experience of peace in a day, and you would like this to be potentially part of medicine that goes into this book with pictures for people to look at, it can be anonymous. It can just be a quote, or it can have your first name. You tell me what you prefer. Then we'll have a real-time book, sort of patient to patient in our program, person to person. And I know when she told me about the cat, I felt peaceful hearing it. I had a little shot of a moment. So it can be a medicine. So I'm always looking for missions as to ways to get, soul and spirit into the experience of people in our program. So if you'd like to participate, email me or call me. You can call switchboard, say, can I please leave a voicemail for Helen Battler? And share a little nugget of what's given you peace in a day. So that's a little bit from the soul medicine. And you can create this, do this with your friends, do this with your partner. It makes great conversation. It can get very tiring, Cancer, as you probably noticed, takes over your whole life and sometimes half your conversations. Let's talk about peace for a change. And get your grandchildren or your children on it. Get them noticing that feeling. Teach them how to know what that feels like. We need a society that knows how to create peace. Well, if we don't know what gives us peace, how are we going to have it in a culture? So let's not let cancer steal that from us. So you can have your own peace project. I'm going to move through these quickly. It's in your handout because we're almost out of time. I'm going to say a word about the big D, because it's here. It's in the room. When the word cancer is spoken, the next thought behind it is death. One of the challenges when you're the person living it or a loved one is no one wants to talk about that. And neither do we, really. It's scary, terrifying, and all that stuff. But the problem is it's here, and we know what elephants in the room do. We know what they do. So I'm going to put the elephant in the room and give you a little bit of my perspective. And again, this is what I've learned from people living the experience. And this is why Jen wanted to write her story, because it is not a tragedy, always. It can be something different. We've lost that wisdom in our society. So, a little word about the big D. Death is not harmful. It hurts. It's painful. Right? Murder is harmful. Torture is harmful. Death is part of life. And I'm taking a bit of a risk saying that because it's not pleasant if it's any of us. And if I was in your shoes, maybe I'd have a little voice saying, well, easy to be you saying that. Right? And absolutely valid. But I've had to walk with a lot of people who've had to face this. So I've learned something. And that's why I'm offering this. They're shared. We don't get a free ride. They're part of life. And in the end, if we're going to try to pretend to our children that, it's somehow we get to avoid this or not talk about it, what are we teaching them? We're teaching them we can't handle it. That's not what our kids need. They need to know, how do we do this thing? And we used to live in tribes. It used to be much more part of our culture. We've lost that wisdom. Grief is healthy. Grieving is healthy. Grief gets harmful when we block it. So grieving, keening, wailing, raging, storming, that's healthy. I want a storming room in the cancer center. I don't think it's going to happen. Wouldn't it be great? A room you can storm in. You can say, oh my gosh, right? And get it out and have someone caring and able to be with you in that. So they're healthy. Grief is healthy. It's not harmful. So we try to protect loved ones, right? I don't want to trigger grief, but my goodness, it's actually harmful not to have it. So you don't want to go around making people grieve, but if it's there, welcome it. It's part of our human heart's way of healing, of strengthening ourselves. You know, if you had a good cry, after the good cry, remember how you feel? When you've really got all the tears out, it's like after the storm, right? It's healthy. So here's where I go for teachings around death, right? If I turn to nature, I had to do this on a retreat once in Hawaii when I was in crisis. We were told to go study death in nature. It was an amazing experience. I had quite a moving, life-changing experience. So look at what happens in the forest after a fire. That's what we can teach our children about death, suffering, the bad things in the world. Well, here's what grows. We can offer to our children and grandchildren and each other in the hard places. Look at those incredible flowers right in the clay, in the desert of no water. So these kinds of thoughts will drill us down into where do you source hope from? Because if we can't source it ultimately from the big one, we're going to spend our lives trying to run from it. So I have a whole set of narratives I work with around my sort of worst fears and around what would happen if. And when it's me, or if it becomes me who's diagnosed with a fatal disease, I will have to go through my own process. It doesn't get me the privilege of bypassing the rage and the pain. But for now, the way it plays in my mind, I've got enough. I've got some ground under my feet. What I've witnessed, person after person, is it's possible to find a place to stand and land on. Not permanently, you have your bad days, but you can find ground under your feet. If we can ground ourselves in that truth, then fear actually can't have any hold on you. It can't stick, right? It can't torture you. And then we can focus on today. What is today? What's real today? Living life. When people are overwhelmed by illness, we must give them physical relief, but it's equally important to encourage the spirit through a constant show of love and compassion. It's shameful how often we fail to see that what people desperately require is human affection. Deprived of human warmth and a sense of value, other forms of treatment prove less effective. Real care of the sick doesn't begin with costly procedures, but with the simple gifts of affection, love, and concern. That's the real medicine. And that's what we can offer to each other, and you don't need training to do that. And that's what we need to seek out. So we can't do it alone. These are some of the things, I won't read all of them, they're in your handout, but these are some of the things people have told me that they've experienced by working with the fear around cancer in their own lives. Not something I can predict or expect, but it's something that happens so often. I really believe it to be true. But never all the time, just some of the time. And then your bad days, you reach out, you get support. Here's your checklist. How do I know I'm in crisis and I really need help? That's in the presentation you can take home. Those are the things you look for, and especially if you have a week, 2 weeks, and you've really, I call it the flat line. You're not shifting, your mood isn't shifting, you're getting grayer, bluer, you're not sourcing the strength as you did, and you've lost all sense of strength. That's when you reach out and help. If you are a patient in the cancer program, or a family member, or a caregiver, you can call us in supportive care and get some support from our team. If you're after treatment a long time, then make sure you connect with your family doctor to get connected to supports. And if you do have those thoughts, I call them the deep dark thoughts, where really some days it just feels better, just if it was all over, call the mental health line. There's not a human being alive that hasn't had those thoughts, really. So just pay attention, or call a friend and say, I'm having a really bad moment. I might need some help. That's okay, because sometimes it does get to be too much. So you reach out, because what we really need is our hearts to feel connected. So feed your soul for today, keeps you hopeful for tomorrow, 3 breaths, and some good companions along the way. And thank you very much for coming and sharing the time.